Hello friends, today I'm going to explain the second part of the Siccin series, which is also based on a real incident, just like Siccin first. So if you haven't seen Siccin part 1, you can go to my channel and watch it. I explained it there as well. So this movie came out in 2015 and was very well received, just like Siccin part 1. So let's get started with this explanation video. So the movie begins by recounting the real incidents that took place in an isolated cemetery, explaining when and where these events occurred. The events in this second part were also based on true events, as I mentioned in my previous video, and everything that happened in Siccin part 1 was also based on real incidents. So despite these revelations, the mystery surrounding the events from Siccin part 1 and part 2 has yet to be solved. After this introductory scene that reviews what happened in the previous part, the movie shows us various horrifying scenes from Siccin part 1. So we then transition to a new setting where we meet a character who enters his house holding a bowl filled with acid. Inside we hear screams and the man proceeds to pour the acid over himself, leading to a gruesome death. Who this man is and why he did this will be revealed later in the movie. The scene then shifts to a family of 3. Vikrant, who was featured at the beginning of Siccin part 1, her 2-year-old son, Virul and her husband, Adnan, who works at a hotel. The story is set in 2013. During Virul's second birthday, the boy suddenly falls ill and tragically dies. This event causes a rift between Adnan and Vikrant. They start arguing, and Adnan blames Vikrant for their son's death, saying it's his fault that Virul isn't in this world anymore. In a later scene, we see Vikrant is watching a video of his deceased son on his phone, becoming emotional and breaking into tears as he remembers him. On the other hand, Vikrant keeps washing Virul's clothes and holds into them as a way to keep his memories alive. However, Vikrant starts noticing some strange things, like seeing her husband Adnan laughing, and he tells her about his brother Virul, who was delighted to find out that named his child after him. Adnan asks Vikrant if their son Virul is inside the house, but he's not really there. This reveals that Adnan has a brother named Virul. At one point, someone knocks on the door. It turns out to be her husband, Adnan. This makes Vikrant run back into the house, realizing that whoever she was talking to wasn't her husband. Was this a result of a hallucination or black magic? We'll find out later. In the following scene, Vikrant is with her friend Ailan, sharing her thoughts. When Ailan suggests they go to a specific place, Vikrant gets angry and leaves. Next, we see a scene from Big Boss Village where 2 women are shown praying, who are Vikrant's mother and grandmother. Her grandmother is mute, as depicted in the movie, and Vikrant often visits her child's grave. One day, while returning home, she sees the same 2 women she saw earlier, who were standing over Virul's grave. This frightens her, and she begins to pray. That night, she has a terrifying dream and doesn't understand what's happening to her. During this time, Vikrant tries to talk to Adnan, but he still blames her for their child's death. The next scene shows Vikrant crying at her child's grave. She once again sees the same 2 women. When Vikrant returns home, she can find Virul's clothes. This was her only way of feeling connected to her son. Inside the house, she finds a box with a picture of Virul covered in blood and also sees a knife. The following morning, Vikrant listens to her friend Ainura and goes to another place. Ainura asks Vikrant to write her name 3 times on a piece of paper and then pricks her finger to leave some blood on the paper. She then puts the paper in a bowl, adds water, and gives it to the child who was present. After reciting some prayers, The child sits down next to the ball and Ainura recites more prayers. A spirit enters the child and starts to reveal things to him. It asks Vikrant about her aunt and what kind of relationship she had with her. Vikrant mentions she had two aunts, one from her mother's side who is no longer alive and one from her father's side with whom they no longer have any contact due to a domestic issue. Vikrant also shares that her father died by a suicide. It's then revealed that the man who drank acid and died at the beginning of the movie was Vikrant's father. The priest finally tells Vikrant not to be afraid, but that someone has cast black magic on her. This is known as stage 1 black magic, which is very dangerous and hard to break. There are 41 different methods to perform this magic, and until they know which method was used, it's hard to break the curse. In the next scene, Vikrant is working at home when she sees a horrifying sight and gets really scared. Since neither her husband nor her son is alive, she decides to go to her mother's house at night. She asks her mother about her aunt, her mother's sister, whose name was Chitra. Her mother explained that Chitra's husband was an alcoholic and gambler who lost everything. One night, he went mad and killed both of his daughters, Gulzar and Suleika, then set himself on fire and died. Meanwhile, Vikrant calls Adnan, but he doesn't answer. At night, her mother has a very frightening vision. The next morning, Adnan is still mourning his child, recalling him while looking at his friend's child. Unaware of all this, Vikrant decides to find out more about her aunt and goes to the village's old man, who tells her that the village has no connection to that aunt anymore. While wandering through the village, Vikrant meets a girl who tells her about a haunted house where an evil spirit is believed to dwell. No one goes there, and if they do, they leave immediately due to fear. After getting directions from the girl, Vikrant sees the same two women in buraks that he's been seeing throughout the story. As they reach the haunted house, the weather begins to change and there are strange things hanging outside the house. Upon entering, Vikrant feels an ominous presence and hears a child crying from the bed. When she removes the blanket, she finds a doll, and behind her, two children appear, asking her to play with them. Suddenly, a creepy man appears and grabs her by the neck. The entire house starts shaking, and she quickly grabs the doll and runs away. Vikrant's mother and grandmother are at home, and they see Zara, Vikrant's sister, the woman Vikrant saw in her dream. Zara was the one who appears at the beginning, and she's the same one they see at home. A child was being taken out of her stomach, and this sight frightens both Vikrant's mother and grandmother. The next morning, Vikrant heads home. When she goes to the hotel, she learns that Adnan hasn't shown up for work in several days. Returning home, she hears Widow's voice and sees her aunt Zara at a grave, saying that she was also expecting a boy but didn't get one. And this scares Vikrant, and she runs to Abdullah's place with the doll. Abdullah opens the oil used in the ritual, takes something out and tells Vikrant that this is one of the 41 most dangerous forms of black magic, which can be passed from one generation to another. The situation gets even more complex because it's still unclear who performed this black magic and why. Later, Vikrant's mother suddenly dies and her grandmother starts speaking. The grandmother reveals that Vikrant's mother never liked Zara and was envious of her and her two daughters. Zara was going to have a third child and her husband wanted a boy. This led to further turmoil with Zara's sister manipulating her into visiting places and trying to fulfill her desires. Despite being simple people, they fell into traps and the grandmother and mother eventually came to a tragic end. The black magic was used to eliminate the entire family, and the cursed oil in the doll symbolized a family curse. Through the doll, the spirit controlled Ramzan, who killed his two daughters. The same house where Vikrant found the doll and the children inviting her to play was the site of these tragic events. The terrifying man who grabbed her by the neck was none other than Ramzan. The woman Vikrant saw in her dreams was actually Zara. Ramzan didn't harm Nehara because she was pregnant and was praying at the time. Afterward, he went outside and set himself on fire. Following these revelations, Vikrant learns that Nehara had a child, but since she couldn't become a mother herself, Nehara kept the child at home. Eventually, Nehara killed her. The story then reveals that the man who set himself on fire was Ramzan, and Gulabdan and Guzar were his sisters. Upon learning this, Vikrant becomes extremely angry and slaps her grandmother twice. When she goes into her room, she finds her grandmother Nehara dead on the bed. Her grandmother starts apologizing, remembering her son. The man who drank acid at the beginning was Nehara's husband, and he knew everything. He once told his mother that someone who only considers their own children as children while ignoring others' children shouldn't even have a child. In anger, he threw acid on his mother. This old woman pretended to be mute all these years, so no one would ask her questions. In the end, the grandmother also dies. At the end of the movie, when Vikrant reaches home, she sees her husband, her parents, her two sisters, and even her son sitting in the hands of a stranger. And with that, the movie ends. So friends, this was the story of Siccin Part 2. I'll soon explain this third part of the Siccin series on this channel. But before that, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video. I'll see you in my next video. Until then, have a nice day.